The movie begins by showing a beautiful girl named Jane Austen playing the piano in a modest house. Jane comes from a poor family where her father only works as a church pastor while her mother is just an ordinary housewife. However, even though she lived in a small house with her parents and sister in the suburbs, this situation did not dampen her determination to dream big. Every day, Jane spends more of her spare time writing a book because her big dream is to become a famous, successful writer. Unfortunately, her family, especially her mother, did not support her hobby because they thought being a woman who wanted to be a writer was a disgrace to the family. On Sunday morning, after Jane and her family returned from church, her mother, Mrs. Austen, took Jane to the residence of the Lady Gresham family, one of the richest aristocratic families in the city. Mrs. Austen's purpose in bringing Jane there is to introduce her to Lady Gresham's nephew Wisley in the hope that they can set them both up in the future. Mrs. Austen wants Jane to have a decent and happy life by marrying a young man from a rich family so that Jane doesn't have to live a difficult life like her. However, after Jane realized that her mother wanted to set her up with Wisley, she immediately said that she objected to the arranged marriage. Her response clearly made Mrs. Austen annoyed and disappointed in Jane because she was afraid that Jane would lose her chance to marry a rich man. On the other side of downtown, a young man named Tom Lefroy is talking with his uncle, Langlois. Tom is a young lawyer and nephew of a wealthy and respected city family. Uncle Lefroy, often known as Judge Langlois, is the Chief Justice at the highest court in England. Unfortunately, Tom often squanders the money he gets from Uncle Langlois to have fun and gamble in nightclubs with his friends. When Uncle Langlois found out about his bad habits, Uncle Langlois immediately called Tom to his office and warned Tom to focus on his studies. Uncle Langlois emphasized that so far, the person paying for Tom's college was him because Tom's parents could not afford to pay for it. To teach Tom a lesson for his mistakes the other day, Uncle Langlois decided to send him to the village and live with his other uncles. Even though he objected to Uncle Langlois' decision, Tom couldn't do much and had to obey orders from his wealthy uncle. Back to Jane's family residence, where Jane and her family welcome her brother, Henry Austen, the only member of her family who has just graduated from Oxford University. Besides welcoming Henry's arrival, they celebrated the engagement of Jane's sister, Cassandra, who will marry in a few weeks. At this moment, Jane was asked to read the handwriting she had prepared for her brothers and sisters. However, while Jane was reading her writing, Tom and his uncle suddenly came to her house because his uncle had been invited to the celebration. After that, Jane returned to reading her writing, which turned out to be quite long and slowly started to make Tom feel bored and sleepy. He even criticized her writings and sentences because, according to him, her writings were still very amateurish and irrelevant to the situation at that time. Jane, who accidentally heard about it, became very annoyed with Tom, and he forced her to tear up her writings. The next day, Tom's uncle, Robert, realizes that Tom is getting bored with life in the countryside, so he suggests Tom take a walk and see the sights around the village. Coincidentally, when Tom was walking through the forest, he again met Jane and tried to talk to her for a while. But she is still annoyed with the criticism he said the other day, so she prefers to leave him behind. However, when he started discussing the profession of a novelist, Jane turned back and approached him. Jane said that a woman can be a successful novel writer just like a male novelist because there is no difference in writing between men and women. The most important thing for a novelist is knowledge of human nature, intelligence, and a sense of humor expressed through selecting the best words. And that ability is not only possessed by men but by women, so there should be no need for discrimination against a woman writer. After expressing her annoyance to Tom, Jane immediately left him, who seemed to be interested in her thoughts. In the evening, at a dance, Jane meets Tom again and accidentally they become a partner to dance together. However, between the dances, they continue to argue about their differences of opinion and perceptions. Jane became even more annoyed and surprised because Tom always managed to dodge and win the debate. The next day, Jane wrote about Tom's arrogant and insolent attitude in the writing she was making to vent her frustration. The other day, the Austens and the Lefroys were having a cricket match on a field. After several matches, Tom beats the Austen family, which provokes Jane to win the match. She immediately went to the center of the field, took the stick from Henry's hand, and prepared to hit the ball with all her strength. When she hit the ball, it bounced so far that it crossed the field's boundary. Everyone looked surprised because Jane turned things around and won the match in a landslide. One day, when Jane was relaxing at the Lefroy family's residence, she asked Mrs. Lefroy permission to read a book in the Lefroy family library. When she arrived at the library, Jane accidentally saw Tom reading a book in the reading room. Because of that, she canceled her intention to read in the library. But when she was about to leave, Tom approached her and read one of her novels. Tom criticizes several sentences in the novel, but Jane is not angry with this criticism. She listened to his input carefully and began accepting every suggestion he gave to improve her next writing. Before Jane left, Tom gave her a book and told her it would help her become a better writer. In the evening, Jane read the book Tom gave her and finished the book late at night to find out the whole story. The next day, Jane went to meet Tom and told him that the book he had given her was not in line with the novel she was going to write because it did not describe the real world. Hearing this, Tom intended to take the book back, but she held it and said she could use it as a reference for her next novel. The next day, Jane and Tom went with their siblings to the market to witness a festival held in their village. When they were traveling together, they suddenly saw a wrestling show, and Tom immediately registered to participate in the match. Although he first managed to dominate the game in the arena, Tom had to fall when the opponent threw a hard punch to his face. Jane, who saw what happened, immediately approached him, who was still unconscious, and tried to help him stand. Fortunately, not long after that, Tom returned to his senses, and Jane was relieved to know that he was fine. Since that incident, their relationship has somehow become closer than ever, and they begin to realize their feelings for each other. On a different day, Lady Gresham and her nephew, Wisley, came to the Austen residence to propose to Jane. Since Wisley met Jane for the first time at Gresham's house, he has fallen in love with her beauty and charm. Therefore, on that day, Wisley knelt in front of Jane and began to propose to her. He reveals that he has a wealth of property worth millions of dollars and will be the sole heir of the entire Gresham family fortune, so that if she accepts his proposal, all of the wealth can belong to her. Unfortunately, because Jane has no feelings for Wisley, she politely declines the proposal and says she still has no plans to marry. After hearing her refusal, Wisley was so disappointed that he immediately left her. The next day, when Mrs. Austen found out that Jane had rejected Wisley's proposal, she was very angry with Jane. Mrs. Austen said that she deliberately set up Jane with a rich family not to elevate their family but to ensure that Jane could get guaranteed happiness. She didn't want Jane to be her only unmarried daughter and continue to be a joke to everyone. Then Jane conveyed her reasons for rejecting Wisley's proposal. She revealed that she did not want to marry just because of wealth, but she wanted to marry someone she really loved. Hearing the fight between Jane and his wife, Jane's father, Mr. Reverend Austen, tried to mediate and reconcile them. But Jane still felt annoyed with her mother and chose to leave them. Then he tried to talk to Jane and persuaded her to accept Wisley's proposal because he wanted her to have a decent life with Wisley. But Jane remains firm in her convictions and prefers to live a simple, comfortable life rather than living with other people's wealth. The next night, when Lady Gresham's family is having a ball, Jane, who attends the party, tries to find Tom. However, after searching various places, she could not find him and instead accidentally met Wisley. Wisley then asked Jane to dance together, and she was forced to accept the invitation even though she felt less enthusiastic. Not long after, Jane finally saw Tom coming to the dance and asked her to dance with him. Jane's face, which had been somber, became happy after she saw the person she loved. Lady Gresham, who saw the closeness between Jane and Tom, became very upset and disappointed in her. After the dance, Lady Gresham summoned Jane and asked her to speak privately. Lady Gresham then tells Jane that she should accept a proposal from Wisley because he has ignored the proposals of many girls just to be able to marry her, a country girl who comes from a poor family. After hearing Lady Gresham demean her family, Jane could only remain silent and immediately left the party. When Tom saw the sadness on her face, he immediately approached Jane and asked how she was. Then Jane was honest with Tom and told him about the matchmaking problems she was experiencing. She revealed that she could not marry someone she did not love, even though the young man came from a wealthy family. After expressing this, Jane conveyed her feelings to Tom, and he immediately said honestly that he liked her. Tom told her that he did not come from a rich family and only depended on his uncle, who was very wealthy for his life. But he promised to work hard to make Jane happy and give her a better life. The next day, Jane and her brother, Henry, went to Mr. Langlois' residence in London to get to know Tom's family. While having dinner together, Mr. Langlois started asking questions about Jane's family background. Worried that his uncle would not approve of their relationship, Tom lied and said that Jane was a famous novelist. This clearly made Mr. Langlois feel amazed by Jane and proud of Tom, who had a very talented girlfriend like her. While in London, Tom invites Jane to meet some well-known female novelists so that she can learn many things from them. That night, Jane suddenly got the inspiration to write a novel entitled First Impression, which would later become the forerunner of her famous novel Pride and Prejudice. The next morning, Tom went to see his uncle to tell him about his relationship with Jane. But before he could tell about their relationship, Mr. Langlois suddenly got a letter about Jane's true family background. After knowing that Jane was just an amateur writer from a poor family, he scolded him for lying. Furious, Mr. Langlois said he would never approve of their relationship. After hearing these words, Jane approached Tom and asked what they should do to solve this problem. Unfortunately, Tom said that he couldn't do anything to change his uncle's decision, and he had to obey his uncle's orders because he had financed all of Tom's family's needs. Even though he loves Jane, Tom is forced to end his relationship with her to protect his family. Hearing Tom's decision, Jane felt very disappointed in him, and she did not expect that her dream that had begun to awaken would just disappear. She had no choice but to return to her home and return with her family. After Jane left for the village, Tom began to feel frustrated and returned to his old habit of spending money at nightclubs. The same thing was experienced by Jane. She had to live her life as before, feeling sad and heartbroken. One day, when Jane's family was having dinner at the Gresham family's residence, suddenly, her father received a message saying that Cassandra's fiancé had just died from jaundice, which he suffered while doing military duty. That night, Jane's mother and Jane tried to calm Cassandra, who had just lost the person she loved so much. A few days later, Jane heard that Mr. Langlois had planned to set Tom up with another girl from a wealthy family. She could not do much and could only cry silently, knowing that Tom would have a relationship with another girl. Feeling frustrated, Jane decided to see Wisley and accept his proposal. But after she broke the news to Wisley, on the way home, she again met Tom, who had just returned from London. Tom says that he still thinks about Jane since they split up and failed to forget her even though he has tried so hard. Tom then revealed that he was willing to let go of all dependence on his uncle if Jane wanted to live with him and live a new life together. At first, she was hesitant, but because she still loved Tom very much, she agreed to his plan to elope together. The next day, Jane packed her things and said goodbye to Cassandra. After she left a letter to give to her parents and Wisley, Jane hurriedly left the house secretly. Cassandra wanted to prevent her from leaving, but seeing her firmness and determination, Cassandra let her go and even gave her some jewelry as provisions. After Jane left the house, Tom immediately picked her up and asked her to leave the village to start their new life. Along the way, she was very happy knowing she could live with the man she loved. Unfortunately, in the middle of the trip, the horse-drawn carriage they were riding in suddenly collapsed due to the wet and muddy roads. They were forced to postpone their trip and rest while waiting for their horse-drawn carriage to run again. While Tom was pushing the carriage with the coachman, Jane accidentally found a letter that had fallen from his jacket. In the letter, she finally knew that all this time, Tom's parents and siblings were very dependent on the money given by Mr. Langlois. His mother advised him to always be kind in London and always do what his uncle ordered him to do. After reading the letter, her expression was sad, and she kept thinking about whether the decision they made at this time was really the right move. When Jane and Tom were resting for lunch at a restaurant, she immediately asked about the letter she had found earlier. It turned out that all this time, Tom never wasted the money given by his uncle. Instead, he sent some money to his family in the village. Jane then began to think that their marriage could put Tom's family in a very difficult position, and she did not want that to happen. He tried to convince her that after graduating from law school, he would work hard to finance the lives of both of them and his family. But Jane felt that would be very difficult to do, given that Tom's uncle was Chief Justice of the High Court, and Tom would find it difficult to find a career in law. Besides that, at this time, Jane was only an amateur writer who still had not produced successful works, so the decision to continue their marriage was the wrong choice. Jane says she loves Tom very much but doesn't want to be selfish and put his family in a difficult position. Therefore, with a heavy heart, Jane chose to end their relationship and allow Tom to achieve his dream of becoming a successful lawyer. Then she decided to return to her house and leave Tom, who could only give up watching his girlfriend go far away at that time. Arriving at her home, Jane returned to her lonely life with a broken heart. Her mother realized her mistake and forgave Jane because she did not want Jane to leave them again. One day, Jane got a proposal from a young man named John Warren, and she almost accepted it. But after knowing that he was the one who helped Lady Gresham to send a letter to Mr. Langlois, she immediately rejected the proposal. The following day, Lady Gresham approaches Jane's family and informs them that she has called off Wisley's arranged marriage to Jane. She knows Jane has left the house and intends to elope with another young man. Then Jane accepted Lady Gresham's decision gracefully and maintained good relations as a friend to Wisley. 20 years later, the scene switches to an assembly hall where a talented writer introduces her latest novel. The novel's author is none other than Jane Austen, who has become one of the most successful writers with brilliant works. At this time, Jane, who was getting older, decided to live alone and would never marry anyone. On that occasion, Jane met Tom Lefroy, who had married someone else and had a very beautiful daughter. The interaction between Jane and Tom is a bit awkward because they can still vividly remember their happy memories from the past. Tom's teenage daughter revealed that she really admired Jane's novels, especially her popular novel, Pride and Prejudice. When she asks Jane to read a bit of the novel, Henry, as Jane's assistant, refuses because she does not have enough time to read the novel. But after Jane knew that Tom had named his eldest daughter Jane, then Jane began to realize that he still could not forget her. Afterward, she read the novel Pride and Prejudice next to Tom's daughter and in front of all her fans. After Jane finished reading the novel, she met Tom's gaze for a moment, and it was clear they still loved each other very much. The moral that can be learned from this movie is that we must learn to put aside our ego for the happiness of those we love and protect those around us.